I hope you're not getting tired of this field of receptor dynamics, but it's something that we are very excited about, and we like to talk about it. And I hope you will also believe that perhaps it has some relevance for the future. I spoke about A2A/D2, and I want to start the lecture by also going on with the potential existence of a more higher order complex, A2A/D2 metabotropic glutamate receptor 5, and I will mainly be speaking then moving over into the NTS1-D2 heterocomplexes. We have collaborated a lot in the past with the Ferrara group and with Tanganelli and Ferraro, and now we're starting a new collaboration with Schäfer and Christina Friedland, and we are happy for that. And so let's then go on where I ended my lecture yesterday. And then there are some data over a decade and indicating that in fact there may be a formation of metabotropic receptor 5 D2A2A complexes in the central nervous system. It seems clear then that in this complex, metabotropic 5 and A2A appears to be capable of I spoke about the A2A before, but then you add the metabotropic 5, which they seem to be synergistically and allosterically inhibiting the recognition and signaling of the D2 receptors in this complex. And there are also interactions at the level of the signaling cascades, the MAP kinase and the Krebs phosphorylation, and their impact on the transcription process. And of course, you should also remember that metabotropic 5 have some very beautiful allosteric binding sites, and there are a number of exciting drugs developed based on negative allosteric modulators, positive allosteric modulators. And if you look at metabotropic 5 alone, then you can see that it by itself, these antagonists are well known to produce locomotion, so anti-Parkinsonian actions. A number of results exist that they are also have anti-dyskinetic actions, especially combined with A2A antagonists. And here you have an example of their synergistic interactions in behaviors. You can see that given alone here you don't see very much, but together they give a beautiful enhancement of locomotion. And if you look at microdialysis on the striatal GABA neurons, the motor inhibition system, you can see that the two agonists alone doesn't do very much when you put them into the ventral striatum in this case, but and you measure in the ventral pallidum. But then together there is a marked enhancement of GABA in the ventral pallidum, so activation in this case of the ventral striatopallidal GABA neurons. And they are co-located beautifully in neuronal cell lines, as you can see from the yellowish color coming up. And in cellular models, the Ciruela group have demonstrated with the sequential breadth-FRET technique that in fact they form a trimeric complex, at least in cellular models. Certainly, we will, Daciel and us will try to find them with the modified PLA also in the central nervous system. So these complexes are quite interesting, and they have been located by the group work of the Ciruela in particular. They are located in the striatal GABA neurons, mainly in an extrasynaptic position over here. This is a little, these are the dendrites, and here you have the tag coming up, the dendritic spike, and you can see that it is reached by glutamate from the terminal here through from spillover, glutamate spillover, and you can, adenosine is formed from ATP being released from neurons and from glial cells in various fashions. We should not go into details. Ectonucleotidases break it down from ATP into adenosine, and this glial source, neuronal source of adenosine. So here they are. And here in this complex is synergized to bring down the inhibition. And you know that this will have a major impact, of course, because the major inhibitory impact on these cells, besides GABA, of course, is the D2 receptor. So if you antagonize the D2, things go wrong. You get too much excitation of this system, this striatal GABA neuron, and you get motor inhibition. So let's go for the, I will not go into any details here. And so what comes out of it is that you have, for treatment it was obvious already from the beginning that if this is a relevant target, of course, when you have the break here, normally you have a break by A2A metabotropic 5. And we do believe that one possibility why we were a little disappointed in the clinical trials with A2A antagonist was that perhaps in the human brain, is in particular, the metabotropic 5 break is also important. So just blocking A2A receptors is not good enough. Perhaps you have to block also the metabotropic 5 receptors. That would at least be one possible explanation that can be looked into. And what you can do then from treatment, an easy way, if you just look at simple combined treatment, will be you can bring down the dose of L-dopa or of a D2 agonist, and instead you add these antagonists into the system. And we feel that this is an interesting possibility, an interesting hypothesis, and in this way we can potentially then remove the brake on D2 signaling that develops with Parkinson's disease progression. And this is the type of ideas you get from this work, and it seems possible that there is some truth in it based on a large number of animal experiments as well. So for the future, we should not just look into these heterobivalent complexes, as I spoke about yesterday, with A2A antagonist here and a D2 agonist over here. We should also perhaps look into potential heterobivalent compounds built up of A2A antagonists and negative allosteric modulators of compound or glutamate receptor antagonist at the orthosteric site. It opens novel possibilities. And of course, if the story is true, such compounds would be quite interesting for the future, especially since they should give a high degree of selectivity, which is of course always a problem, knowing that there are so many complexes around in the brain with the A2A, metabotropic 5, and D2. So you need to have a selectivity development. So here we are, and the conclusion based on this work is then that these complexes could be an important target for drug development. A2A, D2, metabotropic 5. And the hypothesis is that in order really to remove this break on D2 signaling that develops with progression of the disease is due to the dominance of both A2A and metabotropic 5 in these complexes. And this should be an interesting thing to test for the future. And now we move into another heteroreceptor that has been around for decades. And we have done a lot of work on it over the years. And it was started with this paper with using propinorapamorphine binding with Luigi Agnati. And we saw a marked reduction of the binding of this compound. Here in this paper we got more clear-cut evidence that it was a D2 receptor involved, that an NMPA also is a D2 ligand, it turned out later on. So there is a clear-cut reduction of affinity, and what we found out also with combined microdialysis, that it is really producing a neuronal plasticity in the basal ganglia through pre- and post-synaptic neurotensin D2 receptor interactions. So there seem to be no effects on the D1 receptors. I mean, neurotensin MTS1 does not seem to interact with D1 receptors. So it's a preferential effect on D2 receptors and inhibition of their affinity. This means, of course, that the story of this paper is then, of course, if you then do a lot of measurements, that what happens with neurotensin treatment and activation of MTS1 is that you switch, or a trend to change the balance, favoring D1-mediated processes and bringing down D2 receptor regulated processes. So you move into favoring the initiation of movements through the direct pathway, where you have the D1 receptors, which remain unaffected by the MTS1. And that indicating certainly an understanding of how these complexes could then change the plasticity of dopamine transmission in the basal ganglia, changing the balance between the direct and indirect pathway by preferential effects on antagonizing the D2 system. And this is just an example of the early work. The reproducible effect was this change of slope, so reduction of affinity, an increase of the Kd value. This effect on the Bmax is not reproducible and non-significant. And the correlate was very nice. We were so happy about this picture once upon a time with Tanganelli, because we studied that the D2 autoreceptors in the dopamine terminals and studying the dopamine release process. And this was the first time we got a really functional correlate to this molecular changes in the membrane preparations. And you can see here that apomorphine, the dopamine agonist, which of course also activates D1 and as well as D2, and all the other subtypes, by the way. So you can see apomorphine brings down dopamine release, autoreceptor activation. Neurotensin 10 nanomolar counteracts it partially over here. With a lower dose, you bring down with apomorphine, and you can, with a lower dose, completely counteract it with the neurotensin 10 nanomolar. And these nanomolar concentrations are inactive by themselves, so they don't give any effects by themselves. It's just a playing on the D2 receptors. And this was the first nice correlate that these effects we found in the membrane preparations have a biological relevance. They do affect the signaling of the, in this case, the D2 autoreceptors at the dopamine terminals. And we introduced the hypothesis that these interactions is a major mechanism for the neuroleptic-like actions of neurotensin. Of course, in 1980, already Nemerov proposed that this was endogenous neuroleptic neurotensin, that it was the really important antipsychotic compound. And of course, our observations with reductions of dopamine D2 receptor affinity in the accumbens, of course, could be a mechanism, a major mechanism for these effects of neurotensin. And so it's been a long story, but you know, science takes time. Research is very slow usually. And, well, sorry about that. Of course, you wonder, all of you, what about, is this really specific or not specific? So you need, of course, neurotensin receptor antagonists developed by Syntovolabo. These two type of compounds were developed, and this one has the highest selectivity, the SR48692, and it's a preferential NTS1 receptor antagonist. And here you can see then that in fact you have a counteraction. You have this effect with the combined treatment of neurotensin pergolide, bring it down. Here you have the neurotensin action partially counteracting it, but this effects of neurotensin is fully antagonized by the SR, the NTS1 antagonist, and you bring back a complete inhibition again. And neurotensin alone doesn't do anything. It's only the higher concentration which starts to play on the dimers. And also this compound could, the SR could also antagonize the reduction of affinity. You have the increase of the IC50 values. It appears like a partial agonist-antagonist, the SR compound, when it's given alone, but together it antagonizes it. So at this moment when you have to compete with neurotensin, it is a clear antagonist blocking the action. So it seems that the story was then supported by the work on the neurotensin antagonist. We are dealing with an NTS1 receptor playing, on which neurotensin plays and brings down the D2 receptor recognition. And Barotto, Escuela et al. Demonstrated for the first time in 2013. It takes time for development. Beautiful Brett signal coming up in this transfected cells, hex cells. Both the D2 long form and D2 short form were modulated. And Barotto Escuela here beautifully demonstrated that all the D2 short and long and NTS1 can compete and counteract the formation of this complex. So that then makes this story has a good basis. Now we can be on the way. And in this work, Daciel then demonstrated very beautifully the dramatic shift towards the right when studying the ability of this neurotensin 1 agonist to modulate the quimperal inhibition curve on CREB, that is using a luciferase reporter gene assay, and it's very clear cut and it's very pronounced and backing up all the data we had in the central nervous system for many years. So this was rather, in my mind, really important observations. When you move into the SRE, that is the regulation of the MAP kinase pathway, then you have the other way around. With the angiotensin 1 agonist, just switch the increase with quimperol to the left, so the D2 receptors can more strongly activate the MAP kinase pathway, and this interaction, however, is not probably, this is an allosteric modulation. This is probably involving the PKC, as you have indicated over here, that you have the complex over here with the homologies present in the interface, as we proposed with Sasha Tarakanov. And here you can see, here you have then the inhibition by NTS1 activation of D2 signaling over this GIO inhibition is activated, and you counteract and this counteraction of the phospho-Kreb inhibition is then counteracted beautifully by the activation here of NTS1 that inhibits then the GIO coupling to this pathway, and instead the enhancement of MAP kinase or the pathway appears to involve PKC, because you have a GQ coupling of the neurotensin receptors going towards PKC activation. You have the beta gamma component of the GIO protein, which the beta gamma dimer then also enhance PKC, and when you activate them, of course, you recruit beta arrestin that also can become linked to PKC, which enhances the activity of this pathway. So this is the situation, and of course it indicates the dynamics of things, that you don't just stop signaling, you switch it into other things. And here is I wanted to show a picture. You have the Torsten's excellent poster yesterday, but well, you don't see anything anyhow because the light is too high. So you can make it dark in the room, would be great, because it's then you perhaps have a oh yes, here you suddenly see them, the MTS1 D2 heteroreceptor complex seen as a red blob with a technique that Kjell beautifully illustrated in the lecture earlier. You have them in the colored pentamen, and I hope you saw Torsten's poster, and you have them also in the shell, and clearly you can also see them in the accumbens core. And this, we are very happy for this collaboration with Thorsten Schäfer and Christina Friedland in Germany. And this was quite important, this data, because it did demonstrate that in fact we have now evidence that they do exist also in the central nervous system. I mean, it's quite important. With Borotosqueras data on the cell lines with the BRET2, we know they were present. Now with the PLA technique, they are there, and now we realize that this could be a very important mechanism for understanding the biology of neurotensin actions mediated via an MTS1 receptor. Please, could you just go back to the light again there? And then this looks very complicated, but it is a beautiful picture that Borotosqueras prepared, and I just then want to indicate to you how we believe in the local circuit. This is very schematic, so don't look at the anatomy too much. But what I wanted just here, or we wanted to illustrate, was that then in the physiological state then you have a rather low neurotensin tone, I would imagine, in the local circuits of the neostratum. And what you can see is that you have then NTS1 D2 outer receptor interactions here, and you have a tone of neurotensin. So what happens is that you can antagonize the D2 outer receptor here, so more dopamine will be released in the physiological state, and the neurotensin will certainly help out the dopamine coming out from the terminals and diffusing through volume transmission, and it will reach onto the receptors on the glutamate terminals. It will reach the D2 receptors on the striatal GABA neurons and on the striatonigral GABA neurons. But there is a difference, and that is that here you have this some post-junctional neurotensin receptors, D2 receptors, and here they antagonize the D2 action, and they also antagonize the D2 action on the glutamate terminals, where the majority of the MTS1 receptors are located on the corticostriatal glutamate terminals. So what happens is that D2 transmissions is antagonized, but not the striatonigral GABA neurons. They have their D1, more dopamine is coming out in the presence of neurotensin, activating them, so there is a change of the balance as I outlined before. And then this is the plasticity, and also I would like to underline that the major component at the post-junctional level of the MTS1 D2 complexes are found here on the corticostriatal glutamate terminals, which means that when you activate with neurotensin, more D2 is inhibited. So D2 cannot inhibit glutamate release, or very little. So more glutamate comes out, and it increases the drive of both the striatal GABA neurons and striatonigral GABA neurons. Of course, this is very schematic. We don't have the two glutamate terminals indicated here. But this is the situation. And I think that now I would like to indicate an interesting development performed by the Ferrara group, by Antonelli, Ferraro, and Tanganelli, and they discovered that also neurotensin receptor mechanisms are involved in modulating glutamate transmission. So that's a little new story that started in 1995 about. So you have the MTS1 D2. But then something novel developed here. There is also a modulation of glutamate transmission. And let's see what that is, because that will have an impact in understanding the role and potential possibility that the MTS1 is an interesting target in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. And here you have in the control group in the globus pallidus, where the striatal GABA neurons terminate, and you have the lesion groups, that is the hemiparkinsonian rat brain, where you have a complete removal of the dopamine terminals. And you can see that when you give NMDA, you have a very nice increase of glutamate. Everybody would understand that the NMDA on the glutamate terminal enhancing the release of glutamate. And then what happens then? And when this NMDA is given in the dorsal striatum, right? And you record and you change the activity of the striatopelvic GABA neurons, and GABA levels is studied here, is measured in the pallidum, in the dorsal pallidum, right? And so when this pathway is activated, you get motor inhibition. So let's see then what happened with neurotensin. Control group, you measure GABA in the pallidus, you activate with neurotensin and NMDA in the dorsal striatum. It's a dual probe microdialysis. And what happens? Well, neurotensin enhances the GABA levels in the pallidum, so there is an increased activity of this motor inhibition system. You give the antagonist, SR compound, MTS1 antagonist, and then you go from here down, all the way down to here, which means that it not only goes back to control levels just with NMDA alone, it even goes further down, indicating that there is a tone of neurotensin as well, present in the globus pallidus and in the striatum. And then you have the same data with the same principal effects are observed in the Parkinsonian model, although a little more strong actions are coming up. You have the enhancement by neurotensin of the NMDA action, which is all performed intrastriatally, and you measure in the globus pallidus. And here you can see the neurotensin receptor antagonist brings it down, even below NMDA alone. So there is a tone of neurotensin present in both in the control group and in the hemi-Parkinsonian lesion group. And that is indicate that this system here has a real role. So when you discuss neurotensin actions in MTS1, you cannot be limited just to discuss the MTS1 D2 antagonistic interaction. At the same time, MTS1, when activated, will enhance NMDA function through a potential existence of a complex with the NMDA receptor channel, which also can involve PKC. And this has not yet been demonstrated. We have not studied any potential heteroreceptor complex with the NMDA channel. So this is still unknown whether it involves a complex or involves PKC involvement through a PKC loop and phosphorylation aspect, phosphorylating NMDA, enhancing its sensitivity. So this we don't know. But then what is exciting about MTS1 D2 story is that in contrast to the A2A D2 story, A2A is just mainly on the striatopelvic GABA neurons. MTS1 has another potential also, and that is they also exist not only as an autoreceptor on the dopamine terminals, but MTS1 is also present on the nigal dopamine cells and its dendrites, and neurotensin terminals exist here in the substantia nigra summa compacta. And in addition, you also have this mechanism in operation, which have been demonstrated in several papers, the enhancement of NMDA receptor function involving diffusion of neurotensin via volume transmission. And this is reaching into the nigal dendrite cell body. So this means that you can have then enhanced firing because MTS1 activation and will then block, antagonize the autoreceptor function. And when autoreceptor function of D2 is not there, of course, you should get an enhancement of activation. And at the same time, over here also, and neurotensin will enhance energy and give further excitation to dopamine cells. So the thing is that these results would then indicate that neurotensin could be a danger in terms of overexcitation and enhancing neurodegeneration because of loss of energy, and this could be a potential involvement in an exotoxicity or excitotoxicity operating in the nigra. So the conclusion would be then it would not be so bad to give neurotensin 1 receptor antagonist, because that should reduce this marked excitation that is being played by neurotensin peptides, by neurotensin fragments, he termed as a very potent. Neuromedin N is also very potent neurotensin peptides. And in fact, we could demonstrate that MTS1 antagonists can protect the degeneration of dopamine neurons in the Parkinsonian rat model with 6-hydroxydopamine. So there is a neuroprotective potential coming up in this story. And of course, in addition, MTS1 will have symptomatic actions as well in the striatum, because by giving an MTS1 antagonist, it will block the inhibition of D2 signaling in the striatum, and in this way produce a reduction of the motor inhibition. So if you look in the striatum itself then, and you look into the physiological state, you have a balance. I mean, you don't have much neurotensin formed. A little bit is formed from the striatal GABA neurons, and also from the direct pathway, the striatal GABA neurons. And there is a balance between, because heteroreceptors are there, they are partially counteracted by the alpha receptors I discussed. But the D2 is still around, well trained, and then you have neurotensin exciting glutamate release. But there is a balance, and the levels of neurotensin are not very high. And what goes wrong in Parkinson's disease is this then, that the dopamine terminals are degenerating and going down. There is less dopamine, so less D2 activation, so inhibition is becoming really reduced. And then what happens is that you have an enhancement of the glutamate drive, because D2 inhibition was down, so then glutamate will be in dominance, and it will drive neurotensin synthesis and release. And there's an increase in neurotensin levels, which also have been reported in the literature. And this increase in neurotensin form then will really be, in this case, will be certainly contributing to the motor inhibition, because it will enhance the glutamate drive, and this system produces the striatal GABA neurons, it produces motor inhibition. So increase the drive of this system, because D2 inhibition is gone, and the fact is that more neurotensin is becoming formed because of the glutamate drive, and so there will be the further enhancement of glutamate release through the NMDA MTS1 synergistic interaction, and there is a further inhibition of the D2 receptor, further inhibition of the D2 receptor, which is inhibiting, should inhibit it, but there is dopamine terminals disappear. So this is the panorama, and perhaps then you can then understand why an MPS1 antagonist can give reduction of motor inhibition. If you look at the circuits, you have a balance over here in this control group. You can see that if you look at the MPS1 distribution, of course, the major MPS1 receptor presence is in the glutamate terminus. There are a few of them down here on the cell bodies of the striatal GABA neurons. But that there is a reasonable balance, there is a normal motor function. But what happens then, as I indicated before, is in the Parkinsonian model, like in 6-hydroxydopamine lesion rats, there is a loss of dopamine, of course. B2 inhibition is no longer there because B2 is no longer activated by dopamine, and you get enhancement of glutamate release, increased glutamate drive, and in addition, of course, with a lot of neurotensin present in the extracellular fluid through volume transmission, you will have also inhibition of the D2 receptor function. There are also a few MPS receptors over here. So a dominance of glutamate drive, and the glutamate drive from the subthalamic nucleus will be very strong, and finally then they will inhibit the motor thalamus and very little motor drive into the motor cortex of this, and then the classical motor inhibition you see in Parkinson's disease. And what the MPS1 antagonist can do then, besides protecting the cells in the nigra, will then be to restore at least a little bit of at least they can get less drive on these striatal GABA neurons, because you inhibit the MPS1. There is no synergism on glutamate release between the NMDA channel and the neurotensin MPS1 activation, and you can also block out the inhibition by MPS1 of D2 function, which inhibits glutamate release and also inhibits these a little bit. Most MPS receptors are in the terminals, the post-junction one. And then you can, at least to some degree, bring down a little bit the motor inhibition, and you can sort of have some motor drive coming up into the motor cortex. And so, based on this scenario, I think we can then see what potential we have with neurotensin peptides and neurodegeneration. They certainly amplify glutamate-induced neurotoxicity. So, the mechanism is they can enhance the MPS1 NMDA interaction in the nigra, and they can also bring down autoreceptor function in the nigral dopamine cell bodies, and as well as in the corticostriatal terminals, glutamate terminals. So this means that the advantage towards the A2A story, the A2A beta story, is that you have to then consider the possibility that increases of neurotensin levels in Parkinson's disease in the basal ganglia will lead to an MPS1 enhancement of this MPS1 NMDA complex, so enhancement of glutamate release, and they will also, in addition, if you have the increase also in the nigra, you will have a reduction of D2 autoreceptor signaling, so further enhancement of the firing, which can also lead to further excitotoxicity and to their neurodegeneration. So it seems to me that there is a real interesting potential for MPS1 antagonists, and we have shown their protective actions in Parkinson's disease, in models of Parkinson's disease. And together with other treatments, we do believe that MTS1 antagonists could have a role, both as a protective or not, a protective agent, and also symptomatic treatment by counteracting the glutamate drive on the striatopyramidal GABA neuron, which is the motor inhibition system. And then so there is a potential there, which I hope can be explored. So when you compared, we have been talking at this congress on these A2A-D2 heteroreceptor complexes, A2A-D2 metabolic 5 heteroreceptor complexes, and these are mainly, we believe, have a major role in the symptomatic treatment, in bringing down, taking away the brake on D2 signaling, restoring the ability to move by blocking this system producing motor activation, so the motor drive can become restored over the direct pathway. And then you have the MTS1 heteroreceptor complexes, which are should be considered together with the putative MTS1 NMDA heteroreceptor complexes. And of course, it's quite interesting that these MTS1 receptors, unlike the A2A receptor complexes, they are also located on the nigrostriatal dopamine cells themselves. So an MTS1 antagonist will have a relevance not just for the symptomatic treatment, acting mainly on the glutamate terminals and reducing a little bit glutamate drive of the striatopyramidal GABA neurons, but they may have protective activity also on the nigal dopamine cells through, because you have, as I explained to you, that is then a potential trophic action to be considered, or protective action to be considered with MTS1 D2 story, if you bring in also the MTS1 and MDA interaction. And then it is also interesting to see then that perhaps combining targeting of different pathways on motor circuits can be of special value. And the thing is that the A2A receptors, you know, they're predominantly on the striatopyramidal GABA neuron. Instead, the MTS1 and their complexes, they are found also on the nigrostriatal dopamine neuron. So there you have a chance of also getting some potential protective actions on its progressive degeneration. And the major receptors for the relief of symptoms are mainly on the glutamate terminals driving the striatopyramidal GABA neurons, while the major A2A-D2 complex is on the striatopyramidal. Consider these aspects when developing, combining the treatment. So perhaps it may be not such a bad idea in the future, if MTS1 receptor antagonists become available, to use a combined treatment of A2A receptor antagonists together with MTS receptor antagonists, since there are so many targets to be considered and to become optimized in the balance between the system. And of course, the field is opened up, and of course I don't want you to forget about the metabotropic 5 antagonists, the negative allosteric modulators, or the steric antagonists. They may have a special role, especially in the human brain. So we are moving into a novel field with a lot of hopes that the medicinal chemistry will bring up a lot of exciting heterobivalent compounds, so multi-targeting drugs with both D2 agonist activity and A2A antagonist activity, or whatever combination will be useful based on the work that we and others have been doing during the last decades. I think that this is what I wanted to end up with, and I wanted to say then that In some cases, like A2A antagonists, metabotropic 5 antagonists, they can actually work on the same heteroreceptor complex, right? The same complex. In the case, if you bring A2A antagonists, MTS1 antagonists, it seems as if they are acting on different complexes, right? Not the same complex, because some of them, have a differential location in the circuits, these two. And this is also things you should think about when discussing treatments for the future. And I think I think that's it. And I think I have not spoken too long, I think. Yeah. Yeah, you go. Yeah. Now we should discuss.
Talking about treatments and illustrate this synergistic antagonistic method receptor 5 A2A over dopamine heteroreceptor. And I think it was yesterday when you mentioned that in Japan is allowed the use of A2A, adenosine A2A antagonist in Parkinson treatment. But in the rat model, it's obvious that it's working better than we are observing in human. Yeah. The use of A2A antagonists.
Yeah.
And you propose that probably the best one could be in human to combine a treatment between antagonists of receptor 5, adenosine A2A, and that most probably in human would be the.
Well, that is the hypothesis.
Yes, my question is, do you think that could be interesting? Now we have in the market, at least in Japan, one A2A antagonist that we can use in the clinical, in the human. And we know that now it's in clinical phase 1 or 2, the NAM, the basimgluran, as a negative allosteric of the receptor 5.
Yes.
In your mind, do you believe it could be interesting to check the combined treatment of basimgluran with the Japan antagonist A2A, and the one that is...
Well, I think it is an excellent idea that I strongly support. I mean, it's a great idea because it is what would be an excellent test for the hypothesis if that would be allowed to do in the clinic. And I think probably in the immediate future, it will be the quickest way to see if these ideas have any relevance by just combined treatments.
Because so far only this adenosine A2A antagonist in the market, and metabotropic receptor 5, I don't know, but well, we know the basimgluran, but I don't know if that is around another.
No, I think basimgluran seems to be a very important drug discovery by the Roche group, and I think that would be ideal for a clinical trial. And I think that bringing them together may help us get some answers quickly, because before these heterobivalent compounds are developed and entering the brain in addition will take some time. And therefore what you propose is highly relevant. And of course the same approach then may be similar approach when we develop with regard to the MTS1 receptor antagonist, or if you can get an antagonist which will be useful and allowed to use it in the human, one could make a potential story also of A2A antagonist together with MTS1 antagonist. I mean, do they give exciting therapeutic benefits or not, or is it to be over-optimistic? So I think it's a very good idea to bring up this now, because it's the quickest option.
I have a second question, Kjell, is more related with MTS1 D2. Well, now it's well characterized and demonstrated by many groups, and also at the using microrealism, no? The antagonistic interaction of MTS1 with the D2 binding. And as you mentioned, it's really important heteroreceptor complex because they're in the diagram. I mean that they could have potential, or it's not only symptomatic. The focus could be also at the potential level, not only symptomatic like the A2A metabotropic.
Yes.
And then the question is, do you have any idea if people have been checking in Parkinsonian rat model, for example, the expression level of neoplasia receptor 1 in the basal ganglia? I mean, how look like they are?
No, I think that That has not, as far as I remember, but perhaps Torsten knows better. I haven't seen any data on NTS1 regulation in Parkinsonian models. I think it would be a logical thing to do, as a matter of fact. And perhaps I should also point out, and when you bring up this aspect on the neuroprotective potential, that of course over the year, especially Schwarzschild have been able to demonstrate indications of protection in animal models of Parkinson's disease with A2A antagonists as well. But it has been a little tricky, but at the moment it seems that the preferred interpretation of antagonists with A2A may be that they are counteracting the action of A2A receptors on microglia. And of course, we know the impact of microglia neuroinflammation as having a major impact, because they move into the bad state of not repair of degeneration parameters. And so I think, to be more correct, I should say that we cannot exclude protective activity also of A2A antagonists, although I would certainly favor the view that the NTS1 antagonists would have a greater potential than A2A antagonists.
Sure. The last one is not the question, it's just to highlight, clarify, make it more clear. There is something very interesting with the NTS1 receptor, and that is the last point that we're discussing. It's, in our case, we was using in the paper, at least the experiment I was doing on using CREB and HER, I was using the GMB as agonist of NTS1 receptor.
Yes.
But we know now, based on the data from Thorsten and Christina here in Germany, that we should highlight the importance of pharmacology when we are talking about GPCR heteroreceptor complex and the bias effect, because in their case that they're using different agonists for NTS1, they got exactly the same result at the CREB level, but with their signaling, they are different. They behave in different way. At the ERK micronis level, the GMB enhanced micronis. Well, we was checking 30 minutes, that we believe it's more related with the beta resting internalization and so on. But in their case, which time we was using was
active form of the natural neurotransmitter.
There was another agonist for the NTS1, and the effect that they got is, like we observed in the CREB, also antagonistic micronis effect.
Okay.
And then this highlight, and then the point that I wanted to highlight, this is a common, in the last year, it has been discussing a lot in GPCR, that some compounds, they are also, they are behaving different way with the compounds.
Well,
There's some kind of selectivity that is there.
It's very important that you brought this point up. Did you ever do neurotensin itself?
Yeah, only the active form, the A2 the hexapeptide, not the complete.
Not the complete, right? The C-terminal part.
Yeah, exactly. Only the active form.
And the C-terminal component, it has actually an antagonistic action.
Yes.
In both, okay?
But this one,
Microheads.
so this illustrates that you have to be careful, and that obviously these ligands approaching the receptor binding pocket, and the way they reach it, and the way they modulate the function of the receptors can be dramatically different. And then this effect, it illustrates that probably, perhaps this neurotensin agonist we were using would have some.
Well, also, everybody that is doing signaling here, I always highlight we forget always we are talking about mechanism, that is really, we was checking 30 minutes, the person, I don't know which time he was checking the mechanism. The best one will be to compare in time course, because mechanism really develop many peak in sometimes at 5 minutes they have really high peak. Later on, like 40 minutes appear. I mean, it's quite dynamic signal. It's a lot of components reaching the end. And certainly for GPCR, there is this first strong signaling depending on PKC. And, but later on, beta testing also have a major role. I mean, also, mechanism is quite complex because there is also these two components, cytosolic component mechanism, the nucleus component. You know, mechanism should be also looking more time course.
No, I agree, but what this indicates strongly is that when you're trying to see what mechanisms are involved, you should use the true endogenous transmitter, either the neurotransmitter or the C-terminal component of it, and then do the study. Because with all these drugs, they have their own unique actions, and you keep forgetting about that because you want to have a total compound, and then suddenly you move into strange changes in the receptor, which results in the reverse. Because it may shift the pattern of activation in a very strange.
No, certainly this GMB is really high potency.
Yeah. So there is a danger, and of course, in these experiments, pharmacology is all about time and dose. And of course, we didn't test too many doses of this compound, so we didn't have the full range. So I think we have to be very careful.
One addition to that is because the neurotransmitter receptor, especially the neurotransmitter 1, is a very special one because it's mainly coupling to GQ, but it also can couple to GI and GS. Maybe it could be a dose-dependent effect. If you rise up the dose, I guess you use 50 nanomolar, but I don't know actually the dose response curves between anti-1813 compared to your compound. Maybe there's also some activation of some other G proteins.
No, certainly, but they are in different ways.
What you tell now is true, and we should then try to have explore the full dose response curve in this experiment, the concentration response curve, to be really know what's really is going on. And this just illustrates that we have to have the continuous.
The endogenous spectrum also probably that we have this cleavage spectrum, you have a short form and not a long form. Probably they also will have they will behave different also.
No.
Because we have a spinning basing alarm the reptile in the brain, they are really quite
But
dynamic.
this also illustrates one point. Since there are several types of neurotransmitter peptides in the brain, they are just doing the same thing. All of them, they have actually different types of actions on the FS1 receptors, moving neurotransmitter to the C-terminal component or even neuroneedle end. They have certainly, because they do interact and bind in the binding pocket in different ways, will have an impact on the signaling panorama, as you indicate, from the GQ, GS, GI, and so on. And there are no easy ways, that's for sure. And but you have to start, and you have to publish something that you believe in. And we believe in the text, and then perhaps the interpretation will have to change based on this new data coming up. Please?
There's one comment and one question. The comment is concerning the M5 A2A D2 heteroreceptor, because the M5 is from the signaling comparable to MPS1, because it's also coupled mainly to the GQ protein. Maybe it would be interesting to focus out if the signaling of these two different heteroreceptor complexes is similar to each other concerning ion channels and the Kraft and Burgos relation.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you that would be highly relevant to do such a comparison, to see if there are similar features coming up or not. I think that this makes perfect sense, and I think that should be done definitely. And yes, I think so. And what I think also for drug development, I think that perhaps, at least in our work, we have not studied sufficient number of allosteric molecules because they may also be more easy for drug development in the clinic. So I think for the future we should start to play more with the negative and positive allosteric modulators, which also are not as conserved, and in this way they are not so conserved. It may be also easy to get more selective compounds with less side effects, and that will be also relevant.
And the question would be about the NTS1 antagonist, because it is a long story now for 30 years about research in NTS1 and NT2. And in the 90s, there was some trials with patients in the field of schizophrenia. And they supposed that they have the endogenous neuroleptic, which could help everybody. And what they found out in the trials was that the patients got a high risk for gastrointestinal cancers. And that was the story why they kept it out in the 90s and the early 21st century. Do you know if Antonelli, when he did his mouse model experiments, if he tested it for it, if you have the same effect for the neurotransmitter receptor antibodies?
You mean cancer and so on? No, that was never done. They didn't see anything in the primary cultures of striatal cultures and midbrain neuronal cultures, but of course they really did not look at that. And I think it certainly indicates that you have them to be extremely careful. But in your mind, the MPS1 antagonist could be an anti-cancer drugs.
No, I don't know.
I mean, if you believe in this clinical trials that were made, and that would be. My question is, but nobody can answer it, is why they didn't continue this development with MPS1 antagonist. It would be quite exciting to me, at least. And I don't know why they didn't go on with this.
Pharmacodynamic it's quite complex, and there's so many things. Maybe it was something related with absorption of the drug, or could be so many things in between. No, I mean when we're talking about the patients.
Yeah, the distribution.
Well, it could be something that we don't know about. Since the lab developed them, and we like these compounds from the mechanistic standpoint. Of course, I don't know anything about the potential toxicity or something like that. Nevertheless, I hope some company gets a little luck to have some sort of playing on these structures, that they can get a compound that can be tested in the clinic. It's just to be a little lucky and do the proper changes in the molecule and get something that can be tolerated in the human.
Certainly it's not so easy, because in the last 20 years,
no, well,
not many drugs have been
progress
developed.
has been quite slow. Nevertheless, I keep becoming impressed by these interactions between MPS1 and D2, and also this exciting interaction between the MBA and the MPS1 receptor.
No, but they are really relevant. At the molecular level, we can understand what is happening there. No? Then it's in the hands of medicinal chemistry to optimize the.
Yes. Any questions, or you are perhaps? It was clear enough. So then I think we should just close the session, and thank you all for coming over and participating in this.